Imagine a squirrel, but huge, like 2 kilograms.
Whoa.
Yeah, 2 kilograms, huge. That's the woolly flying squirrel.
Okay.
And scientists were skeptical it could even glide well, which is kind of understandable when you think about it.
Right.
So today we're doing a deep dive into the research of Peter Zoller in his paper, The Woolly Flying Squirrel and Gliding. Does size matter?
Interesting.
We're going to try to uncover all the secrets about this fascinating creature.
Yeah, it's a great question. When you think about gliding animals, you usually picture something small and light, not a big fluffy squirrel.
Exactly. So let's start with who this woolly flying squirrel is. Its scientific name is Eupetaurus cinereus, and it's the world's longest squirrel and most massive gliding mammal.
Wow.
Yeah. They live high up in the mountains of northern Pakistan, making their home in cliff caves. I even read they have really dense fur, probably to handle those chilly mountain nights.
Yeah, I gotta stay warm up there.
Yeah, for sure.
And then there's the tail, which is another interesting feature. It's cylindrical, not flat like other gliding squirrels.
So right off the bat, we have a giant squirrel with a strangely shaped tail.
Hmm.
It makes you wonder, how do they even manage to glide?
And that's what Zoller set out to discover.
Mm.
He actually managed to document 3 glide events, which is amazing considering how rarely these squirrels are seen.
Wait, so he actually saw them gliding?
He did.
What was that like?
I mean, he describes these events in detail in the paper. One was a 10-meter glide between trees, another was a 30-meter glide off a cliff face, and the most impressive was a 150-meter glide across a canyon.
Wow.
And get this, during that 150-meter glide, the squirrel was wearing a radio collar that weighed 50 grams.
Wow, that's like me trying to run a marathon with a small dog strapped to my back.
Haha, exactly.
But if they can glide that far, surely their glide ratio must be pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I know that's the horizontal distance traveled divided by the vertical distance.
You're absolutely right to bring up glide ratios, and what's remarkable is that the woolly flying squirrels' ratios are comparable to, or even better than, smaller flying squirrels. For that 10-meter glide, the ratio was 2, which is already impressive, but for the 30-meter glide, it was a remarkable 6.
6.
6.
But how is that even possible? You'd think a larger animal would have more trouble staying aloft.
That's the puzzle, and it's where the concept of size gets more nuanced. You see, while the woolly flying squirrel is the longest, it's not necessarily the heaviest compared to other gliding squirrels. Scientists use something called a ponderal ratio to measure how stocky an animal is. And the woolly flying squirrel's ponderal ratio is actually lower than other flying squirrels.
So it's long, but surprisingly slender for its size. Is that what helps it glide so well?
That's one possibility Zoller explores in the paper. This gracility might be an adaptation for better wing loading. Basically, how much weight is supported per unit area of the gliding membrane.
Okay, so it's not just about being big or small. It's about how that size is distributed and how that affects their ability to glide.
Exactly.
Fascinating.
And there are other factors at play, too, like the air pressure at high altitudes, which is thinner than at sea level. Maybe being more slender helps them navigate that environment.
It's like they've evolved to be perfectly suited for their specific gliding needs. But what about that cylindrical tail? It still seems like that would make gliding more difficult.
Well, it does seem counterintuitive, but it turns out cylindrical tails aren't unique to the woolly flying squirrel. Zoller points out that other large flying squirrel genera like Petarista and Aramis also have them.
Oh, interesting. So maybe there's a reason for this seemingly odd tail shape. Could it actually be helpful for gliding?
That's the theory. There's a fascinating idea proposed by Norberg back in 1990 that suggests different tail shapes serve different aerodynamic functions. Flatter tails, what scientists call distichious tails, act as flow rudders, while cylindrical tails function more like drag rudders.
So it's not just about steering, but also controlling air resistance.
Exactly. And when you consider the woolly flying squirrel size and the rugged mountainous terrain it lives in, having a drag rudder might actually be really beneficial. Imagine them gliding long distances between cliffs and scattered trees. They'd need precise control to navigate those tricky maneuvers.
Right. It makes you wonder if that amazing 150-meter glide Zoller observed was only possible because of the cylindrical tail acting as a drag rudder.
It's definitely possible. And remember how we talked about tail length increasing even more than body length in gliding mammals?
Yeah.
That's called positive allometry. Well, the woolly flying squirrel's tail measurements fit right into this pattern. Zoller even found a tail under an owl's roost, It wasn't attached to a squirrel,
I was like,
unfortunately,
phew.
but it measured a whopping 54 centimeters long.
Wow, that's longer than my arm. But finding the tail under an owl's roost, it makes me think, if gliding is supposed to help them avoid predators, wouldn't it also make them an easy target for owls? Especially, when you see how big those talons are.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something scientists have been debating for a while. Is the main purpose of gliding to avoid predators, or is it more about efficient travel?
Well, from what you've described about their habitat, gliding would certainly seem like a faster way to get around those cliffs and canyons. But wouldn't it also make them more visible to predators, especially during the day?
You're right, there's definitely a trade-off. Zoller actually observed both a northern goshawk and a golden eagle checking out woolly flying squirrels
Yes.
and other flying squirrels while they were gliding in daylight.
Well, that sounds terrifying. So gliding during the day seems pretty risky. Is that why they're mainly active at night?
That's a popular theory. Some scientists believe that gliding at night, when there are fewer aerial predators around, is a way to reduce predation risk. Researchers Holmes and Ostad have suggested that the nocturnal habits of most gliding mammals could be linked to lower predation rates. They even found that some flying squirrels have slower reproduction and longer lifespans compared to squirrels that are active during the day, potentially because they face fewer predators while gliding in the dark.
So gliding at night is like choosing a less traveled route. Less traffic means fewer chances of running into danger. But owls are still a threat, right? They're expert nighttime hunters.
Absolutely. Even in the dark, owls pose a significant risk to flying squirrels. Remember that 54-centimeter tail we talked about?
Yeah.
Zoller found that under an eagle-owl roost, which suggests they're definitely preying on woolly flying squirrels. And there's research showing that other owl species rely heavily on flying squirrels as a food source. For example, the spotted owl depends heavily on Glaucomys sabrinus, another species of flying squirrel.
It seems like gliding has its pros and cons when it comes to avoiding predators. It might protect them from terrestrial predators, but it could make them more vulnerable to aerial predators, particularly during the day.
Exactly. It's a complex balance. And speaking of gliding, remember that exceptional glide ratio of 6 that Zoller observed?
Yeah.
We talked about how impressive it is, but it also raises some questions.
Yeah, it almost seemed too good to be true. How could a squirrel, especially one that size, achieve that kind of efficiency just through its body shape and wing loading?
That's what Zoller was pondering too. He speculates that updrafts, rising currents of air, might have played a role. Or maybe the squirrel was subtly adjusting its body angle to catch more air, like a tiny hang glider riding the wind.
That's a great image. I can picture it soaring through the air, making those tiny adjustments to maximize its glide. It really highlights how much we still don't know about the nuances of gliding in these animals. But even with that incredible glide ratio of 6, it's still within the range of what's possible. The North American flying squirrel, Glaucomys volans, has been recorded with a maximum glide ratio of 6.93.
It's amazing to think that this seemingly bulky squirrel is actually pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
It's a reminder that nature is full of surprises, and that there's always more to learn about the amazing adaptations of animals. But this research makes me wonder about the future of the woolly flying squirrel. We've talked about their size and their glide ratios, those incredible tails, and the challenges of avoiding predators. But I keep thinking about the bigger picture. What about things like climate change, habitat loss, or even light pollution? How might those factors impact these amazing creatures?
Yeah, it's a critical point to consider. The woolly flying squirrel is already classified as endangered, and these growing environmental pressures could push them even closer to the brink.
I can see how climate change could be a big problem. Shifting temperatures and weather patterns could disrupt the delicate balance of their high-altitude habitat.
Exactly. And then there's habitat loss. Deforestation and human development are encroaching on their territory, making it harder for them to find suitable nesting sites in those cliff caves and food sources in the scattered trees.
And you mentioned light pollution earlier. For a nocturnal animal that relies on darkness for safe gliding, all that artificial light must be incredibly disorienting. It could even make them more vulnerable to predators, right?
Absolutely. It's like trying to navigate a maze in a strobe light. Their ability to hunt, find mates, and avoid danger is all based on the natural rhythms of darkness.
It's almost overwhelming to think about all the challenges they face. But this research, it feels like a call to action.
I agree. The more we learn about these fascinating creatures, the more we realize how much they depend on us to protect them.
So after this deep dive into Zoller's research, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this?
I think it's the understanding that the woolly flying squirrel isn't just a a big, fluffy curiosity. It's a master of adaptation, pushing the boundaries of what we thought possible. It's a symbol of the incredible resilience of nature, but also a reminder of our responsibility to protect the, the delicate balance of life on Earth.
Beautifully said. We started this deep dive wondering if size matters when it comes to gliding, and I think the answer is more complicated than a simple yes or no.
It's about so much more than just size. It's about evolution, adaptation, and the intricate web of life that connects us all.
It makes you realize that every creature, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, has a story to tell,
Hmm.
and it's up to us to listen.
And to act. We can all make choices in our daily lives to reduce our impact on the environment, whether it's supporting conservation efforts, advocating for responsible development, or simply being mindful of our own energy consumption. Every action makes a difference.
So, to our listener, we leave you with this thought. The next time you see a squirrel, maybe even just a common gray squirrel in your backyard, take a moment to appreciate its agility, its resourcefulness, its connection to the natural world, and let that inspire you to be a better steward of our planet. Because the fate of the woolly flying squirrel and countless other species depends on it.